As a young adult, I was locked against my will in a state-run mental institution that was so hellish that the drug-addicted mental health technicians left to run the place on weekend nights sold the patients to local deviants and violent perverts who would come in, fork over $40 cash, and then be left alone with their rented mental patient victims to do to them whatever they wanted. And they wanted to do lots and lots of terrible things all night long. Guess where they torture their victims? In tiled shower stalls. All that running water. All those drains for easy cleaning. I was also tortured in that place. On several occasions, I was pumped full of Haldol, strapped face down by my hands and feet onto a metal bed frame in a freezing cold room, and left there for over 24 hours. Strapped down like that, one of my main concerns was literally choking to death on the great volumes of my own drool caused by the Haldol. While lying there, unable to move my hands or feet from the spread eagle position I was locked in, I listened to the storms of screams and wails of violated patients coming from the nearby shower room, where they have all those handy pipes and fixtures for chaining people to. Throughout one such night, I listened for hours to a guy strapped down like I was in the room beside mine, as, screaming and crying, he chewed his way all the way through his grungy bed mattress, which, like mine, was encased in thick, clear plastic. On weekend nights, I got strapped down so that I wouldn't interfere with the night crew making their extra money by selling mental patients to sexual sadists. Ever tried to fight after someone jabs into your thigh a hypodermic filled with Haldol or Thorazine? Don't. You'll lose. When all this happened to me, I was 19 years old. I was in the asylum for 6 weeks, which was as long as they could legally hold anyone against their will. The particular place I was in was so bad, the state shut it down about 2 months after I got out of there. If you know anything about state-run mental institutions, you know how bad that means it was. At the time of my arrest, I had a good job. I had an apartment. I had friends. I was taking guitar lessons, actively doing photography, writing. I had a life. I wasn't crazy. The cops had picked me up in a park I was walking through one night after getting off the graveyard shift at the local factory where I worked. Whenever the people who ran the mental hospital had an empty bed, they called the cops to pick someone up to fill that bed, because they weren't about to go without the $800 per day medical paid them for every occupied bed. They'd have an empty bed. They'd call the cops. The cops would pick up anyone and pull them in, and for at least 6 weeks, the hospital would keep the ones no one came to claim. And one unfortunate night, I was one of those they picked up. And since there was no one to come rescue me, my family had long since scattered and wouldn't have cared anyway. I was stuck there for the full 6 weeks. I got out because after 6 weeks, any patient taken off the streets can petition to get a hearing before a judge. I was granted such a petition 1 hour before my court time, which I was really looking forward to. I was literally thrown out of the hospital because the doctors who ran the hospital weren't about to let me talk to a judge.
Number 2.
I was in a psych ward for 10 days for attempting suicide. I had the most terrifying experience of my life there. I was only 17 at the time and in a pretty bad mental state, which made the following even more disturbing for me. On the first day that I got there, I was assigned a roommate named John. He seemed pretty nice at first and showed me around the hospital and helped me out while I was new. Something didn't seem right about him, though. He would stare into the distance for long periods of time, mouth open, drooling, until I eventually asked if he was okay. The second night I was there, he informed me that he was a Satan worshiper and had the ability to talk to the devil. This kind of freaked me out, mainly because he claimed that the devil and other demons were whispering to him all the time. This disturbed me, and I started to keep my distance from him. He stayed in our room, which by the way had its own private bathroom, for most of the evening, while I played basketball with the other patients to relax. When I had come in for the night and went into my room, I noticed that John wasn't in bed. Then it struck me that the room had been absolutely demolished. The beds were on their sides, and on the back of the headboard was a huge pentagram carved into the wood. Naturally, I started to be concerned, so I knocked on the bathroom door. I heard John making really weird noises and talking to someone in there. I waited 20 minutes to see if he would come out, but he didn't. The weird noises that he was making grew louder, and he kept laughing and talking to someone or something. Eventually, I decided to open the bathroom door because they did not have locks on the inside, so patients couldn't hide. When I opened the door, I saw John covered in blood, naked on the floor, eyes wide open, staring at me. He had smashed the mirror in the bathroom and used the shards to carve deep gashes up his arms and legs. There was blood everywhere. I thought he was going to die, so I immediately rushed in and tried to help him. Big mistake. When I came near, he grabbed my arm and stabbed me with a piece of the mirror. I screamed, which caused the nurses to come rushing in and restrain him. He was laughing like a madman. They brought him to the hospital for his cuts, and I got stitches. I later got a new room and a new roommate. The weirdest part? He came back 7 days later, but stayed in a different ward for psychotics. He came up to me at dinner and had no recollection of the event. Most terrifying week of my life.
Number 1.
I used to be a plumber, and almost weekly, I would get called to the local psychiatric hospital for a backup in their sewer lines. They were complaining about toilets and showers backing up the whole ward. So me and my coworker, who was also my roommate at the time, got up and headed out because it was about 2 a.m. in the morning. We were quite pissed because the past 2 weeks had been nothing but back-to-back calls of mental patients throwing things down the toilets. I'm talking paper towels by the roll, latex gloves, toothbrushes, and anything else they can get their hands on. But this special night, I saw one of the worst things I had ever seen. We got to the ward and the whole place stunk to high heaven. We crawled under the building and released the main line so the ward at least isn't backing up. We then take our jetter, which is a pressure washer hooked to a high-pressure hose with a nozzle that can cut through just about anything that backs up the sewer, and we tried to busy through whatever was clogging the line up. So after a few hundred paper towels, we hit something that didn't want to break. We got the high-powered metal snake, a bigger version of the ones you can rent to do it yourself. Now the snake head was 2 hacksaw blades that spin around rather quickly to cut up and grab a hold of whatever the clog is. What we pulled out was a shredded fetus. But it was the most messed up thing I've ever seen in my life. The worst part was getting the torn up thing off my snake.